So a bluebird that loved to eat cookies and stole a cookie from Nelia. Hmm. Okay. This was. This is what happened to a mischievous bird called Bluey. Bluey was a bluebird, one of the most beautiful bluebirds in all of town. And he loved to show off his blue feathers everywhere. Other birds admire him, and sometimes they would just sit on a branch on a tree to look at Bluey because he had such iridescent blue feathers that it was fascinating. Bluey, however, had another thing going for him. He was a master thief. He loved to fly close to people. He was not scared either. He was very brave, and he would snatch food right from his fingers. But his favorite treat was cookies. And it just so happened that one day a girl named Nelia, which is 6 or 7 years old.
It's maybe 6.
She was 6 years old. Had an assignment in class, which was baking cookies. And there was, of course, flour and sugar and butter and all of the normal things you put in cookies. But there was another ingredient. There was food coloring. Now, not all kids use the food coloring, but Nelia had a little accident. She didn't just use the food coloring. She grabbed the green one, opened the lid, and she was supposed to put a single drop for all of her cookies. But when she twisted the little bottle, the whole thing came down on her cookies. She was worried that the teacher would notice this and she would be reprimanded for using all the green dye that was there for the whole school. So she quickly closed it up, put it back in the table, and pretended like nothing ever happened. However, though, her cookies had about 100 times the amount of green dye or paint that they were supposed to have. So she quickly started mixing them, and they turned out green like Shrek. I mean, it was so green, it was disgusting. Nobody wanted to eat them. And so, as Nelia was outside playing, she was showing one of these green cookies. And Bluey, being the master of stealing things in mid-flight, didn't think much about it, saw something shaped like a cookie, and dove down at super speeds, super fast. Nelia, of course, was focused on one of her friends, showing her the cookie. Oh, look at my cookie. This one is shaped like a heart, and this one is shaped like a star, and this one is shaped like a... Hey, what's going on here? Nelia screamed as Bluey the bird swooped down from the sky, and before anybody could see it, grabbed the cookie from Nelia's hand and took off flying. At first, Nelia was scared, but then she was like, whatever. That was mostly paint, not just cookie. Bluey had no idea what he had gotten into. He went up on a tree and started eating the cookie, thinking to himself, I am the smartest bird ever. Well, guess what happens? I'm sorry, the cookie wasn't green, it was yellow. The dye was yellow. Guess what happens when you mix blue and yellow?
What?
You get green. So, Bluey didn't realize this, but he ate so much yellow paint that the paint started mixing with the color on his feathers, and he started turning green. And he didn't realize this because it took a couple of days for that to happen. But then everybody was like, hey, Bluey, what's wrong with you? You're not blue anymore. You used to be blue. What happened? And Bluey was like, what do you mean I'm not blue anymore? I can't believe it. What happened to me? and he had no idea that it was the cookie. And so he searched and searched for an answer. He was so worried. He really liked being blue. Now were starting, birds were starting to call him Greenie instead of Bluey, and he was okay with that, but he liked Bluey much better. And so he went back to the same place where he saw that girl called Nelia holding up a cookie, hoping to get any answers. But he couldn't. He didn't find anything, except he found a crumble, a single crumble from the cookies that he had stolen. And he looked at it, puzzled. Why is this so yellow, he thought. The crumble had been laying on the floor for a day now or two, and the yellow paint had washed off, and everything around the crumbles was yellow. And then he understood what had happened. He had stolen more paint than Cookie, and that yellow paint had mixed with its blue color. This was a tragedy. He was never going to be blue again. But Bluey knew what he had to do. He had to eat something blue. That way he would turn blue again. Bird logic. You can't argue with that. Well, he searched and searched and searched, but he couldn't find anything blue, let alone a cookie. And so he decided to fly higher so he could see from a higher altitude more and perhaps get lucky and find something blue. But after a full day of searching, no luck, he went to sleep, still green, and the next day he decided to fly even higher. But he could barely see cookies from that altitude. And so he decided to descend. But when he started trying to descend, he realized he had caught a thermal that was pushing him higher and higher. And this was no ordinary thermal. This was part of a cumulus nimbus cloud. This is terrible, he thought. If I don't get out of this current of air pushing me up, I'm going to end up inside of a cloud that's full of turbulence and air and rain, and perhaps even the most scary of all, hail, which is floating rocks of ice. This was a terrible thing. It was horrible. Bluey couldn't stop, even though he tried to get down. The wind was so hard, pushing him up, until he crossed the inside of the cloud. And now he couldn't see where the sky was. It was like being in the middle of the densest fog ever with tons of wind. He was being sloshed back and forth by the wind. There was nothing he could do. And then he saw it, the scariest sound and the scariest sight ever. It was millions and millions of little rocks of ice, hail. He had seen hail before, but only when he was on ground and once in his life, and he took shelter under a tree branch. He never saw hail flying around, and this was no organized flying around. It was hail bumping all over the place. It was like being inside of a blender. This was terrible. He started feeling the hail hitting him, and some of that was hitting hard. He started losing some of his feathers, and then with less feathers to sustain him and to create a bigger surface area for the wind to push, he started falling down. Finally, what a relief. And he started falling and falling and falling. And suddenly he realized he was falling a little too fast. Extremely fast. He was falling way too fast, and he had very few feathers. He opened his wings and they almost got ripped apart by the air rushing through his wings. But he finally managed to stabilize himself just in time to land. And when he landed, he realized that the cloud and the wind had pushed him really far away. He was in a new place, and he had lost most of his feathers. And so other birds saw him and said, "Hey, who are you?" These birds had never seen him because they were not part of his neighborhood. He was in a very different, distant land now. And so he said, "Well, I'm Bluey." And why do they call you Bluey? The other birds say. Because I'm blue, don't you see? You don't look blue, you look like a chicken with no feathers. Bluey was so embarrassed. He just walked away with his head down, pecking at some insects, eating perhaps a seed here and there. And so the days passed, and his feathers started growing back again. And before you know it, 2 or 3 weeks passed, and Bluey had most of his feathers back. He had regrown them, and this time they were more blue than ever before. He was so relieved. He made new friends, and everybody now knows him as Bluey, the chicken that fell from the sky. The end.
Best story ever.
Good night, Pequeñín.